Today, as Dr. Vidge mentioned, we have two outstanding panelists, two physicians who were true health heroes. And I will let them talk about all of this. The objective of this session is to understand the critical role of the heart as the most critical organ in boosting overall health and recognize the importance of resilience in enhancing cardiovascular health and gain insights from engaging these health heroes with their personal stories regarding cardiovascular well-being. And I'm sure they will offer you tips and many tricks from their own practice and their lifestyle.
What I'm going to talk about is, I promise it's not a diet talk. It's not a nutrition talk. It's not a weight loss talk. It's not even a talk about how to prevent yourself from developing heart disease. What I'm trying to develop here is a framework, and I am grateful that you're going to let me throw this out and see how people react to it. You're among the very first people to hear this set of ideas that I've been working on for quite a while now. And it's a framework for what I call thinking about your own health. Thinking because I believe that some of the most powerful intelligence you can develop about your health choices will come from your own thoughts. And thinking about your own health, because I really want to emphasize the ownership of your health data. And the ownership of your health data should be yours, and we should recognize its value. So, as I said, I promise it's not a diet talk, but let's just take a question, a theoretical example. Let's assume for a moment that you are, say, a human being, and a human being who needs to eat food. And you may be aware that there are different kinds of food, and that some of them may have potentially different impacts upon your body, your metabolism, your health, your future health risks. And so you may have thought at some point, how am I going to decide what I should eat? So I dreamt up of a number of different things that I might about, maybe vision about how am I going to eat, what kind of diet am I going to eat. And for sure, you all know now, there are a lot of people with loudly voiced opinions. They're influencers. They're speaking with great certainty about what you should eat. So perhaps you should listen to one of them. Perhaps you should pick one and go with it. You might also ask your doctor, but this is a talk for another day. The healthcare system is not entirely set up to spend a lot of time with each patient, coaching them through nuanced decisions like their dietary choices. And so in the limited time that most people have with their doctors, there's really not enough time to do dietary work. Now, if you went to the library and holed up in there for a year and really educated yourself and read all the about the zones and the epidemiology and the longitudinal data and the guidelines of every organization with a well-developed opinion about diet, you could certainly come up with a decision. It would probably be something like the Mediterranean diet. And maybe that helps you. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's a good choice for you. I think an even better choice might be to listen to your grandmother. And when I say your grandmother, I'm talking about someone who, A, has some accumulated wisdom, and B, and importantly, is someone who loves you, someone who deeply cares for you in a very generous, altruistic way and has your best interests at heart. And so if you're fortunate enough to have such a person who knows you, who cares about you, and who is wise, then that person may, in fact, be a good source of decisions about your own health. But the framework that I've developed here for thinking about your own health, it goes beyond that. And that is to accept that these people who give you great certainty about what your diet should be, perhaps shouldn't be so certain. That we should accept that there really is uncertainty in this question, and that I am going to make a choice for myself. And in order to figure out a prudent path for myself, I'd like to have some guardrails, perhaps based around the evidence, based around the scientific literature, so that I know that this extreme is dangerous, this extreme is dangerous. I'm going to stay here. But I'm going to base my choice on my goals, my culture, my health data. I'm going to take notes. I'm going to keep a notebook. I'm going to be a scientist for myself, and I'm going to come up with, I think, the best decision of what I'm going to eat for me. Now, again, if I turn to the influencers, here are a couple of doctors. These are real doctors. These are our colleagues. This is a cardiologist, a preventive cardiologist, who very convincingly says that you should be a vegan, that you should eat a vegan diet, and that it is the healthiest way for you to live. And yet, on the other hand, here is another doctor with the same degrees, the same legitimacy and expertise, who says that beef is a health food, and that if you are that if you disagree with him, you are he calls you a soy boy. You're something less than. So there are plenty of influencers with great certainty. Now, I'm going to give the cardiologist the edge in this debate, because at least she recognizes that there's a big difference between correlation and causation. And so just because we have observed a correlation in our scientific observations does not mean that we have understood the truth of what is going on in the biochemical mechanisms that underlie the relationship between diet and the development of disease. On the other hand, this guy who says that beef is a health food, truth is, he looks like a Marvel superhero. He looks pretty good, doesn't he? And actually, he holds some age group world records in some strength competitions. And so, maybe he's got something too. So this doesn't really resolve the question for me of what is the truth? What is the truth about what to eat? Now, in the 1950s, there was a cartoon called Pogo. And Pogo was a set of critters who lived in the Okefenokee swamp and said wise things to each other. And along came this fox, this sly fox, Sam, who made the comment that one man's truth is another man's cold broccoli. And I've held that in the back of my mind for the last 50 years. Just to say that just because someone presents you a tasty opinion does not make it the truth. Now, you might say you're going to listen to an expert, and for sure, in many of the last decades, I have held myself out as something of an expert, at least in my area of cardiovascular disease and interventional cardiology. And I've been around the world, and I've lectured, and I've done research, and I've seen things. But honestly, that's not why I think I should have your credibility and your trust as I offer you some recommendations about how you're going to make these choices and live your life. In fact, instead, it's really because this is what I do nowadays. And these are some of the fastest 60 to 70-year-old men in America. This was a few months ago at a big professional track meet, the Los Angeles Grand Prix at UCLA, and we gave what is called a master's exhibition of the old men. Let the old men go out and run one. So most of us here in this group are in our 60s. This fellow in red, though, had just turned 70. And as it turns out, he beat us all. And on that day, he set a new age group world record for the 100-meter dash. This Damian Leake, he ran 12.59 seconds for the 100, and we all were a step or two behind him. And so why should this give me any credibility? Okay, so I'm an old guy who can run pretty fast, and it's because we didn't just get to run very fast for nothing. It's because the guys who do this have really very, very consciously paid attention to their health for many, many years to get to the position where they could do what they're doing. And despite that, and in very much in contradistinction to what many influencers would like you to believe when they tell you that, oh, you don't need to age, that if you take this supplement, you won't age, or you do this therapy, you're not going to age. The truth is, from where we sit as masters athletes, looking at, here's the 100-meter world record by age group. We run in five-year age groups, 35 to 39 and 40 to 44 and so on. It's inexorable. We are aging. We get slower. And I need to adjust this slide because here, as I said, my friend Damien just ran a 12:59. So we got to drop that age group world record. But we are going to age. And despite the truth and the inevitability of our aging, I think that we can do our very best by thinking about our health and taking care of our health. And so what do? Well, these are my friends. We train together, we work out together, we race together, we compete together, but we also talk together about what are we doing, what are we eating, what are our problems, why does our hamstring hurt? Why have we slowed down this month? What are we doing wrong? What can we do better? And because it's a very quantitative sport, it's a very data-driven sport. And so I'm advocating that not only in your exercise and your athletic endeavors, but also in your basic self-care, that you can gain more intelligence and make better decisions by being a quantitative thinker. Now, I don't have a grandmother anymore, but if I did, I would hope it would be someone like Flo Myler here. This is another friend of ours, and she is 89 years old. I'm gonna let that sink in for a minute. She is 89 years old, and she runs the hurdles. She pole vaults. She does the triple jump. She holds 18 age group world records for athletics. And so I definitely want to know what she's eating. And I asked her advice. It wasn't so dramatic. She said, well, I eat a turkey sandwich and some banana bread, and I have a protein shake. And really the only thing that I could really grab there is that she probably does eat a little more protein than the average 89-year-old. And I think you can see that that's why her muscle mass, and just look at her legs, this is not what most 89-year-old legs look like. So return to Pogo. Sam the Fox comes along and he says to Pogo Possum, here's your chance to make a fortune. I've invented a cure-all and I've got 10,000 bottles and we're going to sell it and we're going to make a fortune. But the cure-all that Sam had bottled was just swamp water. And I urge you, at any time you encounter someone who's telling you about a cure-all or a supplement or a therapy that's too good to be true, take it with a lot of caution. It's probably swamp water. So because I spent my 10,000 hours in here in the cardiac catheterization lab looking inside thousands and thousands of hearts, I do have some idea about what it is that over a lifetime tends to accumulate and cause coronary artery disease or heart failure or valvular heart disease or the other manifestations of cardiovascular disease that we fear. But rather than go so deeply into the science of all of those diseases, I think that for most of us, we can start and make a tremendous amount of progress by starting here, by getting some exercise. And honestly, I don't recommend that anyone go out and try for the first time tomorrow to run this fast. You'll probably pull a hamstring. It takes a good year or so of building up general fitness before you, in your later adult years, you can try sprinting at 100%. But building up to that, and of course, credits to the fellow who stacked this shelf so beautifully with all of these cakes and buns and pies. It's very artistic, but it's not good for any of us. None of us should be eating that, almost never, ever. So if I was going to be quantitative and I was going to think about how to make my own best health decisions, I would want to keep a notebook. I would want to keep a scientific laboratory book. And these are a few of the things that I'm going to close with that I might want to put into my notebook. I'd want to think about what are the problems that I have with my own health and what are the risks, particularly based on my genetics and family history, that I need to be particularly concerned about. Am I more concerned about cardiovascular disease, or am I more concerned about osteoporosis, or am I more concerned about cancer? And depending on what those may really influence what is the ideal diet for me or for you or for anyone who's going through this process. And for any of us, then, the very simplest data that you can record in that notebook might be the basic data of what size is your waist? How much do you weigh? Keep an eye on that. Keep track of that over 10 years. And by gosh, you've really learned something. If you have 10 years worth of data, you're going to know, when I eat this way, I lose weight. When I eat that way, I gain weight. When I do this, I'm healthier. When I do that, I'm not. And then if you go ahead and add some metabolic parameters like your hemoglobin A1C, a marker of your blood glucose, or your lipids, your cholesterol and triglycerides, and you track those over a few years and in concert with your eating patterns, why then you can really begin to dial in what is the optimal diet for you. Now, if you wanted to go another level beyond that, as we do as competitive masters athletes, I might start thinking about recording in my notebook what's my training log, what are my times like, what is my strength, how much am I lifting, what's my VO2 max, my maximal cardiovascular fitness. And all of those are going to give me intelligence as I am able to correlate them with the diets, with the drugs, with all the things that I'm doing to take care of myself. And at the very next level, the most extreme, as you can put on a wearable device and you can monitor your sleep and you can do 1 million blood tests and you can do body composition testing. And all of those are interesting and perhaps even useful, but these levels of data and data about that, thinking about your own health like a scientist, like a good engineer, trying to solve your problem and identify your optimal self-care is the best way for you to answer that question that I posed at the outset. What am I going to eat? Or any of the other kinds of questions that you might encounter in your day-to-day life about your health.
My topic is going to be heart resilience. So what is heart resilience? See, heart resilience is the ability of the heart to withstand and recover from physiological stressors, be it physical exertion, emotion, or it can be after a cardiac event like a heart attack or a major heart surgery. It is imperative for patients who have a major heart surgery to follow a heart-healthy lifestyle so that they can increase the resilience of their heart. So when we talk about resilience, let's talk about a healthy heart's resilience. So what is your heart? Your heart is the size of a fist, and it beats 100,000 times in a day, pumping 2 gallons of oxygen-rich blood to every organ and every tissue in your body through 50 million miles of arteries and veins. So if you take a guy like me who's 76, my heart has already beaten more than 3 billion times. So how do we protect this jewel that is lying in the chest cavity? Well, we have coronary arteries. We have got the right coronary artery, the left one, and the one going behind. These crown the heart. But to understand the coronaries on supplying the blood to the heart, we need to understand the cross-section of a coronary artery. So here is your coronary artery. Your endothelium is the inner lining, which produces a very powerful substance, nitric oxide, which keeps the artery dilated, keeps the blood flowing into the lumen, and protects the arterial wall so that it is elastic and it is supple, does not harden up to cause high blood pressure. But folks, what happens when you have an unhealthy diet? Say, for example, the standard American diet of meat, eggs, dairy, processed food, or for that matter, to have a junk food, vegan or vegetarian diet with your saturated fats and sugars and dairy. Well, what really happens is that there's a damage to the endothelial lining. And once this is damaged, the bad actors from the shadows come out to play now. This is your fibrin, your calcium, and cholesterol, which will now come and start forming plaques. And if they form plaques over here, for example, for years it takes to form a plaque, and you can get angina when you have chest pain on exertion, or if the breakage of a friable plaque, and then you can have a heart attack, and 50% of the people die of a first heart attack. So here comes my story. I am a 76-year-old physician, but I am also a heart disease survivor. See, till the age of 61, I created my own unhealthy lifestyle. I indulged into terrible foods. I was at one point, without worrying about what effect it would have on my health, and I was once called a seafood eater, S-E-E. I ate everything at sight. And what I would do is I was working very hard, long hours, with very little sleep, 4 to 5 hours max, and that to a fractured sleep, not a restorative sleep. And when I was not eating what was in front of me or not working hard, what did I do? I was a couch potato. I did absolutely no exercise. Sorry, I may have done exercise for my hand muscles using the remote to change the TV channels. All this led to a tremendous amount of stress, chronic stress that I could not handle. And so I was not surprised when heart disease came knocking at the young age of 56. And 2 of my arteries were 98 to 99% blocked. I had to have stents, and when the stents failed, I had to have open heart bypass surgery. Now, this is where my transformation takes place. I told the nurses in the ICU that I would do a half marathon in a year's time if all goes well. I really don't know why I said that at that particular time, but I guess I had very few options left. So when I woke up, my recovery was remarkable. I was on the treadmill on the 3rd day. I started eating right. I started exercises, running, and I started incorporating meditation, yoga, and breathing exercises into my daily routine. And in 7 months, I managed to do a half marathon. It took me 3.5 grueling hours, but I did it. My bruised heart did not fail me. From then on, there was no stopping. I've done several marathons. As Ram said, I've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. I've done a 100-mile bike ride. I've bungee jumped, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, I was also thinking, I was wondering that is there a way that I can heal my body without solely relying on medications and invasive surgery? That is when I came across the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine. And that the cornerstone of this lifestyle medicine is your healthful eating. And the rest of them complement the healthful eating. Your physical activity, your restorative sleep, your handling of stress, your avoiding substance abuse, and forming and maintaining relationships. So let's take each one at a time. I would prefer that Americans should have much more regarding fruits and vegetables, grains, beans and lentils as a protein, the plant protein, nuts and seeds. They should increase their fiber in their diet. I mean, an average American eats 15 grams of fiber. You need at least 38, but I would say go in for 60 and 70. It did me a lot of good. I had diverticulitis with perforation. Now it is in the back burner. So what should a person do? Look at labels. If you cannot pronounce something, don't eat it. Avoid processed foods, salt coloring agent. Cut back on your sugar and salt. An average American takes 17 teaspoonfuls of processed sugar. And salt, 3.6 grams of salt. When the American Heart Association says 2.5, well, I would say go back to about 1.5. Avoid junk vegan and vegetarian food. All this, dairy and sweets and oils, and reduce your cholesterol by, avoiding meat, saturated fats. Avoid dairy products if you can. Or as somebody once said, that dairy is like liquid meat. If you have a cup of milk, it is the same saturated fat and cholesterol as an ounce of meat. And then avoid trans fats, vegetable oils chemically altered to stay solid at room temperatures, like what you have your palm oil or your coconut oil. And remember, folks, if you're going to be plant-based, remember to take your B12 and your vitamin D. Next comes physical activity. Any activity is better than no activity. But you have two different kinds of activity. One is your general physical activity, where you burn calories, you increase your endorphins, you feel good. That's great. That's like gardening or walking in the park or playing golf. But there is a purposeful exercise. And this should be in combination. But purposeful exercise reduces your blood pressure, your weight, it improves your insulin resistance, it reduces your cardiovascular disease risk of that, and increases your good cholesterol. So, what in that case, you have to do 30 minutes of exercise daily, moderate intensity, and you should be able to reach 70% of your maximum heart rate, at least in those 20 minutes of that 30 minutes of exercise. And it should not be only endurance exercise or aerobic exercise. It should also incorporate muscle strengthening exercise, especially for older people. And that is what I always tell people, that your muscle strengthening exercises are important. Your wall push-ups, your ground floor push-ups, and then you have your balance exercises: standing on one leg, tying your shoes, or putting on your shoes, standing up. These walking on your toes, walking on your heels, and then finally it is your stretching exercises. And I kid you not. When I started doing my Surya Namaskar or the sun salutation, that gave me the stretch like no other exercise has given me. But that said, that works for me. It may not work for you, but give it a try. The third thing, which is very important, which so much of research has been done, I can talk to for an hour on sleep. Sleep is your superpower. It is a non-negotiable biological necessity. Sleep is not the absence of wakefulness. Sleep is an active state of rest where your brain does phenomenal things for your health. Now, you're supposed to sleep 7 to 9 hours of nightly sleep, and that too a restorative where you have your REM sleep and your non-REM sleep. How much did I do? 4 hours, and that was fractured sleep. Now, there's a Japanese study that has been done for about, I think, 14 years. And what they found that if you sleep less than 6 hours a night on a routine basis, then your chances are 4 times more, 3 to 4 times more of getting your heart rate increase, your blood pressure increase, and dying of a sudden cardiac death. Now hear me over here. Just 1 hour makes a difference. And this is a global experiment done in how many countries? In 70 countries it is done, and it is done on 1.5 billion people. And what is it? Daylight savings. In spring, when you lose an hour, you know what happens? There is 23% increase in heart attacks the very next day. And in autumn, when you start gaining an hour, there's 21% reduction in heart attacks. Isn't that absolutely incredible? Sleep is truly your superpower. So when you want to do just 4 rules of sleep, go to bed only when you're sleepy. The analogy is you don't go to the dining table and you sit down over there waiting to get hungry. So why should you wait to get sleepy? Only use the bed for sleep and sex, not for your TV and not for your phones and messaging. If you can't fall asleep within 15 to 20 minutes, get out of the bedroom, go around, do something else like massage, read a book, listen to music, meditation, and then come back when you're ready to sleep. And sleep and get up at the same time. It is important even on weekends. You're not going to, if you sleep late, you're not going to make up the weekday sleep. So be careful about that. And, early afternoon naps helps, short naps. Now, we go on to the next thing, stress. What is basically stress? Stress is defined as a state of worry or mental tension caused by a difficult situation. And this is chronic stress, where your cortisol levels increase and you start eating more and you get obese and you get diabetic and you get sleep apnea. Your chronic stress is caused by what? The 4 Ds. Either you are in debt, divorce, disease, or death. So for this, you do need crutches, like your meditation. It can be religion. It can be your yoga. It can be breathing exercises. And sometimes you may require medicine, and you may help of a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist. And the next one is avoidance of risky substances. Tobacco, everybody knows. If you are drinking for health reasons, forget it. It does nothing for your health. But if you're drinking responsibly, I'm not here to stop you. But it does no good for your health, no increase of your good cholesterol or anything like that. Now, where I'm worried about is prescription and non-prescription medicines. I mean, think about it. Look at the fentanyl crisis, the cocaine, the amphetamines, the pain meds, hydrocodone, oxycodone. I see these patients. Once they're hooked, they're gone on. And over-the-counter medications. Can you imagine? I had a patient recently who walked in. He was having Motrin, ibuprofen, he was taking 2 tablets, I mean, 6 tablets in the morning, 6 tablets in the afternoon, and 6 tablets in the evening. So he was taking it for 35 years. He came to me with kidney failure, with his heart problems, and with ulcers. So be careful about over-the-counter medication too. And finally, social support. Folks, social connectedness in a blue zones. We have blue zones in Japan, we have one in Italy, we have one in Costa Rica, and one is there in California, your side. Now, what do these people do? They laugh together, they play together, they watch movies together, they exercise together, and they have a strong social bond, these people in the blue zone, which leads to lower levels of stress and anxiety, which lowers the blood pressure and improves heart health. One last thing. This was an observational study done by Dr. Dean Ornish. The importance of plant-based diet. There were 35 people who were in severe heart failure. Ejection fraction was very, very low, and they were waiting for a heart transplant. All of them were put on a whole food plant-based diet, no oil, sugar, or salt. Guess what? All of them improved the quality of life, and 5 of them did not require surgery. So, folks, if you follow the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, you are going to be reasonably okay to avoid a heart disease, to treat a heart disease, and in some cases, reverse a heart disease. Thank you so much.
I'm interested in knowing from Dr. Hellman, how would he package all of this in the notebook?
Yeah, thanks. I think that the all the lessons that Dr. Akil has just given us are very, very reasonable and sound and excellent advice, and worthy of choosing to behave within those bounds. As you said, Dr. Tahir, I don't think you're going to go wrong. Sleep, for example, is a thing that you could keep track of in your notebook. And I'll just share one example. When I was working in the cardiac catheterization lab and on call at least one night a week, and running in the middle of the night to treat heart attacks, and working 80, 90, 100 hours a week in the hospital, I was an early adopter of wearable devices. I was certainly the first kid on my block to have a Fitbit or a Whoop or an Oura. And so I knew how much I was sleeping. I had it in my notebook going back 10 years. I was sleeping an average of 4.5 hours or 5 hours a night. When I left the hospital and switched to a new vocation, within a few days, I went from 4.5 hours of sleep to 7 hours of sleep. And you know what happened? Over the next 2 months, 25 pounds fell off of my body without intending to, without trying to diet in any way. I just went from a little chubby to slender. And the only variable was the difference in probably stress, but clearly the amount of sleep. And so, as I say, if you observe these things about yourself, I took that observation, I made it from my notebook, and I said, I now believe it for me. It's really true. I've heard everybody tell me sleep is important. I've now proved it for myself. Sleep is really important for me, and so I'm going to prioritize it.
Turned you into a super athlete?
Was it sleep?
Did it contribute to your becoming a super athlete?
I think, as I said, competitive athletes are always looking for an edge, for an optimizing edge. And one of the first athletes to recognize the power of sleep was the tennis player, Pete Sampras. And this goes back, 15, 20 years. Pete Sampras would go, but had the blackout shades and the air conditioning, and he would try to sleep 10, 11, 12, 13 hours a night as part of his recovery from his very intense training regimen. And so, is that the secret to why I'm a fast guy? It's probably mostly in my genes. I probably mostly got it from my grandfather. But the 1% that makes the difference between a gold medal and a bronze medal, that has to do with sleep and nutrition and training and everything else.
So let me follow up on that. You commented on becoming a quantitative thinker. Can you elaborate on that? What tools does one need to become a quantitative thinker and be able to fashion your own diet or lifestyle?
Well, we're all doctors who have seen a lot of patients, and I dare say when we come from 3 different specialties, but I'll bet you would all agree with me. One of my favorite kinds of patients is the patient who comes armed with data. And I don't mean that they've gone to Google and come armed with that. What I mean is that you're trying to, let's say, optimize their blood pressure control, and they come to you with a notebook filled with blood pressure data. And in the course of 30 seconds, you can go down the list of their blood pressure recordings that they've made at home, and you can see whether the regimen that you have them on actually has them under good control or not. And so that is the sort of patient whose self-care is more than just about how they feel. They are more than just a passive participant in their healthcare. They are collecting a bit of data. And of course, if they're capable and educated enough to make decisions based on the data, then so much the better. But even those who are not sophisticated thinkers, if they simply have recorded the data, then their interactions, their encounter with the healthcare team is going to be so much more effective because they have provided that quantitative data. And the same could be said for weight and for any other of the sort of major health concerns.
Both exemplified what physical fitness is and your endurance, both physical and your cardiac health. And my question is, for an older person who's a weekend warrior, what is too much? When would you say don't overdo it? Do you train yourself to get to that point?
I think basically you got to train yourself to get to a level where Alan is, or when I did my marathons and half marathons, I did not train the right way initially. But now I understand the physiology of the whole thing. And I would tell people at my age or in their 70s, go slow. You don't have to. There are books written around there of how to do your half marathon, how to do your 5Ks. Go slow. You don't have to thump your foot on the ground at our age. You can glide. You can do things which are much easier. And I happen to always follow this, that I continue doing. I'm not a long distance runner anymore, but I still maintain to do about 30 minutes of running or jogging every single day. So it helps me. That's the kind of thing which can get to blood pressure. I can actually see my blood pressure going down. I can see the benefits of that exercise, of that running. Or if I don't do that, then I'm at home, then I will do my rowing, or I will be on my elliptical, or I'll be on my treadmill. But I do agree with you, Ram, that some people go around and they're bound to get injuries. I did that initially when I was there. I got a calf muscle tear just before the Boston Marathon. I got a medial meniscus tear. I got a metatarsalgia where the tarsal comes out on the foot like a marble on your foot. But the mistakes made, I didn't know. Now I'm aware of it, and I tell people, my patients, how to do it.
Dr. Tahir, I think in one of your slides, I read not bad genes that run in families, but bad diet.
Absolutely. You see, the fact is, genetics loads the gun, but it is your bad lifestyle that actually shoots it. So the whole point I'm making is that genetics plays only 10 to 20% of your health outcome. And that too can be mitigated or negated by your genes, your what you call the recent gene, this thing that you can do, change. You don't change your genes, but you change your environment. With your environment, you can change your gene therapy. So that's what I'm trying to come out with. Epigenetics, that's the word I was using. The epigenetics is very important, whereby you can actually, with lifestyle, change your health outcome.
One of the questions obviously has to do with people of Indian origin seem to have a much higher incidence of heart disease, and it's happening at a much younger age. So do you have any specific advice to people of Indian origin or people who develop heart disease at a much younger age?
You see, according to the Masala study that you know about, right, Ram?
Yeah.
The thing is that we South Asians from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, or as far as Maldives and where Bhutan, see, we don't usually if you go by BMI standards, American BMI standards, we are not obese, but we carry fat. When I had my heart problem, my BMI was 22. So I would have fallen through the cracks. But we carry fat. We carry fat in our belly, around the liver and around the heart. So this is visceral fat, which is directly related to heart disease, which is very much common in Indians. We are also very insulin resistant. We have smaller coronaries and we have got larger lesions. So all these things, plus our women get more problems with hypertension and preeclampsia, South Asian women as compared to others. And we have got much more heart disease at a younger age than the other Eastern people. We were lumped together in the Eastern, but now we have realized that being of South Asian origin is an independent risk factor for heart disease. So my idea is, choose a doctor who knows about South Asian disease. Talk to your family around, because there's so many. I get weekly calls of somebody dying at 45, 48, 46. So, and we South Asians don't talk about it. We love to talk about how our son goes to medical school or engineering school, but we never talk about these problems. We should sit down, talk to our family members, find out ways. For example, I had to tell my cardiologist, I'm sure that my esteemed colleagues know about it, but I had to tell my cholesterol was not coming down. So I went and asked my cardiologist, why don't you do my LP little a? LP little a is supposed to be 30 is normal. Mine was 361. So what my point is, understand the people who are from South Asian origin and try to put them in a separate group. That's my point.
Insulin resistance is really a central problem for the transition from metabolic disease to cardiovascular disease. And so if insulin resistance is present, then we would like to think mechanistically, what are the ways that we can resensitize our insulin receptors? How can we address insulin resistance? And one of the most powerful organs in the body for metabolizing glucose and responding to insulin is skeletal muscle. So where there is insulin resistance, as in many South Asians, where the glucose tends to be high, the triglycerides tend to be high, the HDL cholesterol might be low, there might be more visceral fat disposition. I think adding skeletal muscle is very likely to help reverse those processes. And so while we're both runners and we've both talked about running as our sort of central activity, I don't want to discount strength training. I think any reasonable exercise program, whether it be for your weekend warrior or your elite athlete, whether it be for someone who is starting from beginning, they're absolutely out of shape, getting strength training 1, 2, or even 3 days per week as part of the getting into shape regimen and putting on a few pounds of skeletal muscle is very likely to reduce the risk of injury, make it more pleasant and feasible to do your running or your aerobic exercise or your cycling or your swimming, whatever you want to do. But it also is going to address that insulin resistance and probably therefore reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease.
Can I just follow up on that? Because you see, as you grow older, your muscle mass decreases, but it is partly because of hormonal and partly because of inactivity. Don't go running around buying protein powders. What Dr. Ellen says is very true. That's the time to increase your muscle strengthening exercises so that you can actually get the blood flow over there and be that should be the goal, and not to just run around and get testosterone shots and all those things,
Very good points. Any suggestions for, I mean, since you said no protein supplements, what would a typical soy boy do?
You see, in my opinion, plant proteins and animal proteins have the same kind of amino acids. But the animal protein has far greater amino acids. And I don't mean to say that don't eat chicken or don't. I'm not here to say that. But what I'm trying to say is that when you have your plant-based proteins, just to give you an example, I did my 100-kilometer bike ride eating a meat diet, a processed thing, which was there. And I was 5 days in bed after that. I did my 100-mile bike ride in Mobile in 23 degrees temperature. It took me 9.5 hours, but I was plant-based at that time. As I was coming back, 9.5 hours of biking, then 6 hours to come back to my small town, Gadsden. And on the way, my office manager calls me and says, "We don't have a doctor tomorrow. Can you cover?" And without batting an eye, I did it. So for me, plant-based diet is superb. I had 2 perforations, and my friend, the surgeon, told me, "I think that if I don't take you in for surgery, you may not survive." It's in a back burner now. For me, it has helped me a lot. And people should try it out, even for diabetes, even whatever it is. There is a 21 day, if you're on a whole food plant-based diet, in 21 days, you will be off your medications or you'll have to lower your medications.
I've read some studies showing the longevity benefits of sprinting and high intensity interval training versus jogging or running longer distances at a slower pace. And if it's possible to answer that question briefly, I would love to hear the answer from both of them.
I was just talking about this very question with another friend of mine who's an orthopedic surgeon and is number one in the world masters sprinter. And we had to admit that we're not sure. And I think that for many of the questions, that we're dealing with of lifestyle and its impact on health, we should start with some degree of humility and uncertainty, because the study really hasn't been done. There's no proper randomized trial of comparing sprinters versus assign people to sprint versus assign people to do long distance. We don't really know. If I had to guess, I would bet that probably those who train for long distance or train for endurance and maybe tend to be more slender probably have a lower lifetime risk of cardiovascular disease. They may have a somewhat higher risk of osteoporosis and frailty in their elder years, whereas those who train for power, strength, speed sports, many are going to eat animal protein. Probably they tend to accumulate a cardiovascular disease. I wouldn't if that was the result of that theoretical study if we did it. And probably they also have a lower lifetime risk of hip fracture and osteoporosis and so on. So, for me, again, it depends on personal choices, personal goals as the way to mitigate uncertainty. I think if your goal is to play linebacker in the National Football League, you're unlikely to achieve that goal on a plant-based diet. On the other hand, if your primary goal is live to be 100 years old and not have a heart attack, then indeed a plant-based diet is probably preferable.
What is better for a 75-year-old male, taking 30 minutes walk or walking every hour, 3 or 4 minutes?
Yeah, see, the whole thing is that your moderate intensity activity, which we talk about, 30 minutes a day for 5 days, or you can do is your 60 minutes of intensive exercise for 3 days in a week. But that amount of intensity really helps you to get your parameters down, your cholesterol, your blood pressure. Because see, blood pressure is a silent killer. 40% of the people are walking around with blood pressure, and some of them don't even know that they've got high blood pressure. But it is definitely that my advice was, when I talked about in my slide, was that activity is good, better than no activity. But if you are looking for a result, if you're looking to lower your cholesterol, if you're looking to get your blood pressure down, then I think you should be able to do this exercises, moderate intensity. Either you do 1 hour of walk or but your heart rate should be 70% of your maximum. Now that means what? That if I am 76 years old, then 220 minus my age is my maximum heart rate. That will come to about 140, 150 or 146. 70% of that will be 104, 105. So in that 30 minutes or in that 1 hour of exercise, if you can get your heart rate to 70% of your maximum, at least for a period of time in that exercise, okay, that will help you. Your basic heart rate will also go lower eventually, because athletes have a lower pulse rate. And the recovery also, when you're doing exercise and your heart rate goes up, how soon it recovers and comes back to normal, that is very important too. That shows how much fit you are. If you're taking a long period of time to get your baseline heart rate, then there is a problem. That means you're not really fit and you've got to get more fit. But that is my answer,
Thank you. Another question, if you're having a heart condition, not specified, but heart condition, can you do 12 to 14 hours intermittent fasting?
I love how much attention now is being given to the concept of time restricted eating, of fasting. Every culture since the beginning of recorded history has had fasting in one way or another as part of a spiritual process or a cleansing process or a healing process or part of a festival. You know, there's always, humans have always tried to experiment with fasting. And what we now know is that fasting does a few things. One thing that fasting does is it slows your metabolism. And so if you are at baseline burning 1,200 calories a day at rest, and now you start fasting, you actually slow that metabolism down to by 10 or 20%. You may be burning less calories and need less food. On the other hand, one other thing that fasting does is that it increases the sensitivity of the insulin receptor. And so we returned to that concept of insulin resistance as central to many forms of metabolic and cardiovascular disease. And so if done properly and carefully and safely, you know, fasting is not necessarily a bad idea. And so my overall answer there is I'm not sure. We should again admit some uncertainty and admit some imprecision in our information, particularly in a question like this. So if someone actually has cardiovascular disease, that is indeed a question for their doctor.
I would like to chime in over here. I worked 11 years in the Middle East where people fast. And what I found was that after the Ramadan month of fasting, most of my patients who fasted increased their weight. The reason being that when you fast, you're supposed to have your normal meals after that. You cannot be hogging on food. So that's the biggest problem that I noticed over there. Now, personally, I am a fasting intermittent because what I believe again, that if you eat at the morning sunlight and eat your last meal before the sunset at 5 or something like that, then after 5 you stop eating till next morning 8, 9 o'clock, you're already doing intermittent fasting. It becomes a habit. But I don't expect anybody to do. I could not. Actually, if I do intermittent fasting, but if you tell me tomorrow, fast for 3 days, I can't do it because that is psychological in me. I cannot fast.
That's about where I am too, Dr. Tiger. I try to confine my eating to the busy parts of the day and not eat dinner late. Yeah.
The one favorite question on any heart-related seminar is the issue of alcohol.
Recent studies, very recent studies have shown that alcohol does not do anything for your health. Now, when we talk about health, I'm talking about the physical part of the health. If a drink now and then can relax you and you're drinking responsibly, then, like I said in my talk, I don't think that person should stop. It's your me time, you want to do it. I drink. So, but I drink 1 or 2 glasses. Am I doing it for health? No. But if you look at the bigger this thing concept of health, then I am being, because I like to do it. It is my time. I don't even let my dog come near me at that time. So, I mean, you know, and I listen to my music. I do my things with a glass of wine. Why not?
I answered this question for myself with the notebook approach. I kept track of this for a while, and I also enjoyed a drink. But when I had the data in front of me, I had to admit what I was seeing, which is that my sleep was adversely affected on days when I drank. My heart rate variability, which is a marker of heart recovery from exercise, was adversely affected. And my performance on the track was adversely affected. If I had a beer tonight and I run tomorrow, I will not run as well as if I had skipped it.
You're absolutely right. My son just gave up for the very same reason. He's an athlete. So my point is, at my age and my stage in life, I do drink, but I drink very early in the afternoon. So it doesn't bother my sleep as much. Personal, this is. But you are absolutely right. If somebody is not drinking, please do not start.
Okay.
That's why.
Great advice. Another question. With the LVEF of 45% and 2 stents in LAD post heart attack, what should one do to manage heart health? It's a very specific question.
You want to take that, Alan?
I sure will. I would say that's a very specific question. So we're talking about a patient now who's got coronary artery disease, has had a heart attack, which means some of the heart muscle has died from the lack of blood flow, and the ejection fraction, the strength of the heart muscle, is now depressed because of that damage that occurred with the heart attack. And the good news about this condition is that it is one of the most thoroughly studied conditions in all of human medicine. We've got hundreds of thousands of patients in clinical trials that have been studied over the last 30, 40, 50 years of our medical careers, so that the evidence-based medicine that is prescribed to you by a competent cardiologist seeing that patient is very, very good. It's very, very good, and we are unlikely to in this session do anything to improve upon it. If you've got those things and you identified the problems and you've got a cardiologist who knows what they're doing and sees all those things, then you probably are on several different medications to address them, and each one of those medications is supported by a lot of evidence.
But in terms of physical activity or cardiac rehab, anything specific?
I love cardiac rehabilitation. And essentially, it means a supervised exercise program that transitions into the exercise program to continue for the rest of your life. The specifics of it would depend upon the very specifics of this patient, whether they're fully revascularized, what other conditions they have. But almost every patient that we have who's had a heart attack and has had stents or has had a revasculars, had a bypass surgery procedure, the evidence supports them going to a cardiac rehab program and getting a supervised exercise regimen.
Yes, and absolutely. My short answer is a good rehab program and lifestyle change.
Thank you. I think we have time for just one last question. My fasting sugar is 112 most of the time. I'm pre-diabetic. What should I do? Is there any specific advice for this person?
Again, from personal this thing, Ram, I can always tell you that if that person, now again, I'm not saying that, but you can give it a try. And I'm not going against Dr. Heldman or anything like that. But what I'm saying is they go on a whole food plant-based diet and give it a shot. He will not be pre-diabetic, because diabetes is 126 and above. If it is between 100 and 126, that is the time when it's pre-diabetic. Some people would treat this with medications. I don't believe. I think if your lifestyle change, reduction of weight, exercising, good sleep, stress, this thing will bring down your sugar. I don't think, but it can get worse. So just be careful in changing your lifestyle. No medications.